Next, the latest on Zimbabwe. Yesterday, we spoke with U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Zalmay Khalilzad, about the deteriorating security situation in Zimbabwe. Last night, the UN Security Council condemned what it calls a campaign of violence that will render free and fair elections impossible. Now, the other side of the story. From Zimbabwe's ambassador to the United Nations, Boniface Chidiasiku, I spoke with him a short time ago. Mr. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you.
The United Nations, where you sit, has called for Friday's elections in Zimbabwe to be called off. Will they?
No.
Why not?
Well, the United Nations has no mandate to give instructions to member states on when they should hold elections. That is the prerogative of a sovereign state to decide when and when it suits them to do elections.
So how do you conduct a free and fair election without an opposition candidate?
The opposition candidate has been playing to the media. He deliberately saw defeat in the face, and he realized that the only way out was to jump ship and appeal to the international community, who have accepted what his antics, and is now galvanizing international opinion against the government of Zimbabwe. But as far as we are concerned, we need a mandate from the people, because on the 29th of March, that mandate was not given to any of the candidates that aspired to be president of Zimbabwe. And as per our constitution, that requires a runoff. And we have put the systems into place that Friday there will be a runoff, and we are proceeding ahead.
I don't have to tell you what it is that folks in the United Nations and other Southern African nations are saying. They're saying 85 people have been killed, 200 are missing, 30,000 have been displaced in what they call political violence in your country during this runoff election. Who's responsible for that?
The violence in Zimbabwe, from our perspective, there's been intra-party violence. And that violence, the MDC and ZANU-PF have been found to be guilty of some acts of violence. And on the statistics part of it, we have had most incidences of violence perpetrated by the MDC on ZANU-PF supporters than on ZANU-PF against MDC. And furthermore, when I speak to the police general headquarters in Harare, they tell me that 10% of the country has had some incidences of violence and 90% has not seen that.
So let me just clarify for our viewers. The MDC is Morgan Tsvangirai's opposition party, and the ZANU-PF is Robert Mugabe's party. Morgan Tsvangirai has been detained 5 times, separate times in the last few weeks. Was that not a political detention?
That's what the international community has been told. But the times that he has been asked by the police to visit a police station, he has been transgressing the laws of the land. For instance, in one case, he was driving in a public road, escorted by vehicles that were disturbing other road users. So the police called him and told him that you don't travel like that in the country, and he called that a detention.
So if you choose not to believe, as you do, Morgan Tsvangirai's version of events, what about what the non-governmental organizations say, who have been trying to provide emergency food distribution in Zimbabwe but have been told not to?
The issue of NGOs, we have an agreement with the World Food Program, where NGOs have to observe a certain conduct of behavior in their carrying out of their activities. And we believe as government in Zimbabwe that the primary responsibility to feed the people of Zimbabwe rests with the government. NGOs can only supplement or complement what government does.
And the government is indeed feeding those people?
That's not correct. We have imported 600 tons of maize into Zimbabwe, which we are giving to the people. That's not beating the people. And people, the international community tends to ignore that. We have been importing food, and we have been distributing it to the people in Zimbabwe. The international community or the NGOs do complement what the government of Zimbabwe is doing to feed the people of Zimbabwe. And for your own information, last year, when the United Nations made an appeal for humanitarian assistance in Zimbabwe, the response to that appeal was 17%. And that 17% is a reflection of political consideration by the very countries that are crying foul today. They did not even give their money to Zimbabwe because of political consideration. And today they are shedding crocodile tears about humanitarian situation in Zimbabwe. When you respond 17%, there are countries in the world where humanitarian assistance appeal has been put, and there's been 100% response. Furthermore, Zimbabwe, like other countries in Southern Africa, are suffering from the scourge of HIV and AIDS, right? There has been an international response to the needs of these people. In Zimbabwe, the average international assistance to an AIDS patient is $4 per annum. But our neighbors get something in the range of almost $200 per AIDS patient per annum.
Do you think
and
that
AIDS does not know boundaries. It's only political considerations, and I mean, the whole thing is stupid,
so
really.
Pardon me, Mr. Ambassador, because I do want to ask you about what your neighbors have been saying. The Southern African Development Community has also said that the situation in Zimbabwe is out of control. This is not just Western nations. It is not just the United Nations, which is directing this criticism at you. What do you say to your neighbors who say that there needs to be a renewed negotiation, or at least a halt to what they see as political violence as well?
There was a summit in March in Zambia where the Southern African Development Community met and commended the work done by President Mbeki, and they gave him mandate to mediate on the political impasse, which he is doing. But the problem is some people are so, they don't like the pace that President Mbeki is conducting the work. They've been undermining that work. They want President Mbeki to be condemnatory, which he has refused. And that's why they've discredited his activities. In fact, the international community has become to be an impediment to the efforts of President Mbeki.
If Mr. Tsvangirai were to leave the Dutch embassy where he is currently holed up right now, would he be safe?
Tsvangirai has always been safe in Zimbabwe. You remember after the March 29 elections, he left the country and claimed that his life was in danger. He was out of the country for 6 weeks, claiming that he would not go to Zimbabwe because his life was in danger. He went back to Zimbabwe. What happened to him? The guy is a pathological liar. He's duping the international community that his life is in danger. There's nobody who's interested to get rid of Tsvangirai in Zimbabwe.
So the election will go on Friday. Mr. Ambassador Boniface Chidia Siku, thank you so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.